This is Marshall Adams, Director of Photography for Better Call Saul. You're listening to the Go Creative Show.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Consoli. I'm a director and owner of BC Media Productions. And this is the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. So today's episode is all about Better Call Saul. We've got the Director of Photography, Marshall Adams, on, celebrating the release of Season 5. Now, some of you guys may not know, but Better Call Saul is only a 6-season show. So that's it. We're getting down to the wire here. And the show's really evolved quite a bit. The characters evolved, but also the cinematography and the lighting. So much has changed over the course of this series. And we talk about all of that, the small details, the big details. We talk, of course, about camera selection, lenses, and lighting. And we have a whole bunch of questions from our audience. And so I'm really excited to share this one with you guys. So let's dive right in. There's so much to talk about with Better Call Saul Director of Photography, Marshall Adams. So I'm here with Marshall Adams, ASC, the Director of Photography for Better Call Saul. Marshall, thank you so much for coming back on the show. You were just here a few months ago talking about El Camino.
Absolutely, Ben. My pleasure, man. It's good to be back with you.
Well, clearly we are a Breaking Bad universe supportive show here, a Go Creative Show.
Well, we appreciate it.
Our very first high-profile guest on Go Creative Show was Michael Slovis, the Director of Photography for Breaking Bad. And like that episode and his appearance on the show, like completely changed the trajectory of Go Creative Show. It like elevated us to a point where we're talking to guys like you.
He was super, super popular. I mean, he was groundbreaking in all the stuff that they were doing on Breaking Bad.
Yeah, it's like, and it's so, there's always this weird like through line story where Breaking Bad and Go Creative Show are like always converging in some way. And it's so great to have you on to talk specifically about Better Call Saul. Like I said, you were on for El Camino, but this episode's a little bit more about Better Call Saul, how it's evolving from season to season, because you're down to the last 2 seasons now. We're almost there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We actually only have one left to shoot.
Season 5 has just been released. We're a couple episodes in now. Tell me kind of your feeling about the entire season 5 and also the fact that this series is about to be wrapping up.
Yeah, well, it's obviously it's bittersweet. It's finishing it up is a fantastic experience, and I love working with these guys more than anything. I'm so absolutely blessed to have found them and them finding me. But the show is on a collision path with Breaking Bad, and it's getting the 2 universes are getting a lot closer. So there's a lot more going on, kind of in that vein as we get closer.
And what do you have to do visually? Like I want to talk about this concept of, I mean, you're basically backing up to or heading towards the beginning of an entire show that people have already seen. You've been dropping Easter eggs throughout the entire 4 seasons so far, and now I'm sure into the 5th there's going to be Easter eggs as well. But can you talk to us about the way that the cinematography is evolving, particularly in season 5, but also just in general? Are you doing anything from a cinematography standpoint that is evolving and inching us closer to what Breaking Bad is?
I'm not sure that we are necessarily look-wise. I mean, Breaking Bad in a lot of ways, it had those incredible wide vistas and also, but a lot of it was handheld because it was so energetic and kind of full of life. This show started out very deliberate, and it's getting a little bit more frenetic that way. But for the most part, we still, really kind of anchor our shots in a lot of ways. Of course, I'm always going to steal from Michael's ideas from Breaking Bad. We're working a lot of the same locations, and so I'm always kind of going back and doing research and finding out kind of where he was with lighting and stuff like that, which I borrow some of the colors sometimes. And Michael was an incredible influence on me anyway. I came out to shoot the season opener of the 5th season of Breaking Bad for him that he was directing, and he gave me some incredible advice that I still cherish to this day, about making sure that everything we do with the cinematography is story driven. It has to advance the story. And that, once you kind of get that through your head in a lot of ways, because I was coming off a show like CSI where, it was kind of more about flash in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But anyway, but it has its own look in a lot of ways, and it's not necessarily going to pick up that style, but we are definitely visiting a lot of the places that will look very familiar. So there's that.
I can only assume it gets more and more familiar as you go. I mean, you're butting up against basically the trailer for Breaking Bad. Like you're getting there. So I can only imagine that as you go, you're sort of picking up and getting closer to that time, closer to those looks, going to those locations. I mean, there has to be so much similarity, especially as you're approaching, the filming of season 6.
Right, but remember that we're really we're on a collision path more with like their first season, which was kind of a bit more deliberate and about discovery and meeting all of those people and kind of learning about them. But yeah, I mean, we are constantly like you said with the Easter eggs and bringing characters, showing their development, where they came from, what they're about, kind of, I mean, the whole through line with Hector and his stroke and where he's at right now, and Gus's relationship with him. Gus obviously has a much bigger role this season, and what else can I tell you? It's I mean, and things like Robert Forster, who was in the season opener for one scene, which was just because we had worked with him on El Camino. It was just an absolute pleasure, and I feel extremely lucky to have worked with him before he passed away, obviously.
How many directors of photography are on Better Call Saul?
Just me.
Just you. So you're shooting every episode?
That's correct. I was. So Arthur Albert started the show and shot the first 2 seasons. I didn't come in until season 3.
Yep.
And I shot all of season 3, all of season 4. Season 5, I had to leave for one episode and do the color on El Camino, as a matter of fact. So my operator, Paul Donacci, ended up shooting episode 4. Yeah. So so he's doing, he did 1 this year. So I did 9 out of the 10. And then we'll see what happens next season.
It's so weird how we've got so many people that come on the show that will do blocks. They'll shoot 2 episodes, or they'll shoot maybe 4. Not a lot of directors of photography and television shoot the entire series, at least the ones that we have on our show. It's usually kind of a mix, and there's a couple people that are, referenced as cinematographers and directors of photography on these shows. I can imagine that it's more appealing to get a gig that every episode is yours. I feel like you can sink your teeth into it more. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, there's a great argument for both sides, and I've done both, and I've done both quite a lot. The argument for for alternating with somebody is that you get prep time with the director to basically break down everything, go through every shot, figure out what your plan of attack is, which you don't get when you're shooting every episode. Because Saul is in Albuquerque, I call it a full immersion program. So I spend a lot of the weekends prepping with the directors, but still there isn't enough, there's never enough time to really go through it all like you would if you were on prep for a whole episode. But yeah, it's also, it's very bittersweet, giving up the photography on half the episodes is, it's a tough one. You feel like you really put your heart into it. And I'm very proud of the fact that I've managed to shoot as many of them as I have, and that they've been, as well received as they have.
So that's kind of interesting. So because you're shooting the entire season, you don't have as much prep time as you would if you were just shooting a couple of episodes because of the alternation. I'm assuming that the pre-production for, let's say, episode 2 and 3 and 4 are happening while you're shooting 1 and 2 in an alternating situation. Do I have that right?
Yeah, you absolutely have that right. Essentially, the show never stops shooting. So, for the last day of episode 2, the next day is the first day of episode 3. So, if you did a 2-episode block, you would have prepped episode 1 and 2, and then you would do, say, 5 and 6, right? So then while 3 and 4 were shooting, you would be prepping on 5 and 6, and you would have, quite a bit of time to scout and look at all the locations and talk about all the lighting and the tools and things. So yeah. So there's the difference. So which I try to do as much as I can on the weekends, but there isn't enough time to cover all the bases. So I get as much as I can.
Plus, you also need some time off. You need a little bit of time to just for yourself. I mean, that schedule must be crazy. Or is it? I mean, are you like, okay, so in this situation where you're shooting every episode, do you, like, the entirety of the shooting schedule of the season, is it a little bit longer to account for the additional prep?
No. I mean, we do get some extra time. I mean, it started out, I think, at 8 days, went to 9. I think we're up to 10 now per episode. So it's essentially 100 days plus some reshoots at the end. So, but yeah, they're straight. There's no time in between. So any prep that I want to do, I've got to do on my own time, either before or after work or on the weekend.
I don't think I asked it right. What I meant to say is, like, do you have more time in the entirety of the shooting schedule because you aren't alternating directors of photography than if you were? Like, to account for the fact that you have to do the prep for every episode as well as shoot it, do you have more time? Like, no. So you're just expected to cram it all into a regular, typical production schedule.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of atypical or it's becoming more typical, but in the fact that, we have as much time as we do. We have a few extra days, but that gets eaten up with, that's the one thing, even on a show, on any show, that you never have enough of. Like, when you get into shooting bigger shows like Saul or any of them that have plenty of budget, they'll give you all of the toys and all of the crew and all the manpower and everything that you want. But that's the one thing you can't get any more of. And that's always the one thing you're in short supply of, which is time.
Oh, God. So just kind of like walk us through a typical week for you on Better Call Saul. Like, what are your shooting days like? How much time off do you have within the week? Is there time off? Like, what is a shoot week like for you?
Well, it typically starts, 7:00 on a Monday. The great thing is that one of my camera operators and I, we own a house there together, which is only about 6 minutes away from the stage. So
nice.
Drive time is that's one life-saving thing in Albuquerque. There isn't much drive time.
So you really can't be late ever, or else people are going to give you a lot of crap.
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. I had a problem with my car last year one day, and I was, 20 minutes late, and I got a ration for it. But
I can't imagine. So Monday morning, 7:00, you roll into set because you basically can walk there if you want to.
Yeah.
What happens?
So we roll in. We're typically starting on the stage oftentimes because I'll spend some of the prep time that I will get will happen during the lunches or, time while we're in between setups and I'm talking to the director a little bit about kind of what's coming up. But so we shoot a 13-hour day usually on stage. Maybe, sometimes 12, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. And then, we have so it's a slightly later call the next day. And typically by the end of the week, we're probably into, noons or 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, depending on how many night exteriors we need to shoot.
Yeah.
And then Saturday I get home probably around 2 o'clock in the morning and try to spend most of my weekend kind of reading scripts and prepping for the next episode and talking about equipment and putting out lists, scouting with the directors, and I'm back to work on Monday.
Last time you were on, we were talking about El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie. And, that was released in October. Did you go immediately from season 4 of Better Call Saul right to El Camino and then right to season 5? Like, was there any time off in between?
There was a little bit. I actually went and tried to do another show in San Francisco for a little while, which didn't work.
Tried?
Yeah. 13 Reasons Why. Got the first. Yeah. Yeah. I went with one of our directors from Saul, Michael Morris. And we were going to kind of reinvent the look on the show for their 3rd season. Or at least that was the idea. And that's just not the way it worked out. They had a very different idea, first off, of what the look should be. And also, kind of how it was going to happen. So that was the kind of in between, and then went straight from that to prepping on El Camino, which I prepped for months and months and months. I think I had a week and a half or 2 weeks in between the end of El Camino and the start of the next season, my prep on the next season of Saul.
That 13 Reasons Why. I'm just curious about that. Did you shoot anything for them?
I did. I did the first 2 episodes with the director. He was the producer director who actually quit 4 days after I did. I basically did the first 2 episode block.
Wow. Okay. So they just didn't like where you guys were going visually, or there was some sort of conflict of, opinion.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So,
did they reshoot your episodes, or did they air them?
No, they aired them. It's very interesting because if you look at them, they look very different from everything else on the show. But anyway, it was a lot of fun, and I was glad. My dad lives in San Francisco. I was glad to spend some time with him, and so it was. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it was a horrible experience, but
no, it doesn't sound like it was a horrible experience. I think it's just interesting that you went in. I mean, we always talk about situations that work out great. I mean, people come on the show, they're excited about their project. It looks amazing. Everything's great. But I mean, what you're just talking about, that's like real life. That's a working cinematographer's situation sometimes. Like those things happen, and they don't really get talked about that much. So I'm particularly interested in that stuff.
Yeah, no, it absolutely happens. I mean, you think that you have an idea that lines up with somebody else's idea for a similar thing, and once you really get down to kind of the brass tacks, you realize that there's a very strong departure, and that's when I basically decided that I wasn't going to to give them what they wanted. I wasn't going to be doing my best work. So it becomes a disservice. You know what I mean? It's like, why not get somebody that does want to do that, and that's what they did, and it worked out great.
Let's talk a little bit about the prep for season 5 of Better Call Saul. We have a question from Instagram. Dave Sounds on Instagram is asking, how do you focus on small details that are of great importance for other seasons? So I'm thinking this is things like Easter eggs. These are little hints that sort of maybe, little precursors to something that's going to happen later in the season or in following seasons. How do you put a focus on those super small details, but also make sure that the audience understands that they are important?
You know what? It's very funny. Those Easter eggs, in a lot of ways, aren't really spoken about unless you know what it is that they signify, or what it they don't talk about them overtly. So oftentimes, I think some of that planning is definitely done with the directors, as far as bringing attention to it. But oftentimes they don't even do that. It could be incidental, as it was in the episode last weekend. There was a payoff for one of the characters. It was Crazy 8. We found out that Lalo gave him the name in episode 2, Crazy Ocho Loco.
Yeah,
which becomes Crazy 8 because he's they're playing poker and he has 2 8s and he refuses to play them because he's afraid of Lalo.
So it's stuff that, like, if you don't even really understand the reference, it's fine. But if you do, you get like this little extra boost of, okay, there's a little bit of recognition there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but yeah, definitely. If you're a fan of the show but I'm amazed how often, even with having seen all of the episodes of Breaking Bad probably 4 times, watched Saul, endlessly, shot, all of, have probably 60% of the episodes, 70% of the episodes now. And how many of them I don't catch. So, I mean, it's very, sometimes even the writers will say that, even Vince, when we were prepping El Camino, there was a couple that he even lost track of, that somebody else had to remind him. So it's amazing how many of those details are kind of interwoven. And I mean, he's obviously the master, but yeah, it's, in a lot of ways, it's a team effort. So, and imagine how many of those there are and how many seasons we've done.
Do you pre-vis any of your scenes or shots?
No. No. I mean, we're not much of a vis effects show. And so we don't, and even the directors will come and talk to me about frames and show me images sometimes from the locations and things. But other than that, no, we don't. It's all about kind of being in that space, or whatever, it happens to be in New Mexico and Albuquerque. And so it happens very organically in a lot of ways. And I also have to, I got to call out both of my operators who, in a lot of ways, are very responsible for some of those really incredible frames that they come up with, without me too. I mean, we do it as a team, but oftentimes Paul and so it's Paul Donacci, who's the A camera operator, and Matt Cradle, who's the B camera operator, are both phenomenal operators and have incredible eyes in their own right. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them because a lot of those frames are theirs too. They really are.
Well, talk to me about the way you collaborate with your operators.
We will watch obviously watch the rehearsals, figure out if there's anything minor that we ask if the director can change a little bit, or if it'll help us or hurt us. And then we talk about shots with the director, and Paul and I'll rough in a kind of a rough idea, and then he'll actually massage it with the director. Oftentimes while I'm either off lighting or doing something else, and then I'll come back and tweak it a little bit. And then Matt, we never put the cameras in a place where they're side by side, kind of competing with each other. We're very much a single camera show that works in the B camera when we can. And Matt has this amazing ability to find these really interesting angles that work with the lighting, the sound, where everybody's already, going and standing and moving and whatever. But so that's, a lot of the frames that you see are B camera shots that we've snuck in at the end that, that Matt's found on his own.
That's interesting to me. And as I watch the show, like, that makes total sense when you see some of those more interesting frames, or not even that they're more interesting, but they're kind of unusual, because I like this idea that you approach the show as a single camera show, but then you kind of have a B camera trying to snag like great, cool, interesting angles. Like that I think is a great use of a B camera. It's more than just coverage. Like, you're trying to get something unique and distinct.
Absolutely. And that's definitely a great way of putting it. We don't go out of our way to get a lot of coverage. I mean, the show has very minimal coverage as it is. It plays wide a lot of times, and they love playing shots for a long time. So that's the difference, in that we have a little bit of extra time because we don't have to do so much coverage, that we can find some of those interesting angles like that too.
Yeah, coverage is a big thing. I've been even in my own work, I've been thinking about that more and more, because it's like you go into these scenes and you think you're making a shot list, and you're like, all right, well, obviously I need an establishing shot, maybe a medium, some close-up, some details. And then you're like, do I really need all of that? Like, am I bogging my shoot day down with so many shots of coverage that I really don't need? And it's just it's been something that's been in my mind more. I'm like automatically writing down, wide, medium, close, when you don't really need it. And I think, especially with shows like Better Call Saul, because there's a lot of scenes that kind of live on a wide shot. It just lives there.
Absolutely. And that's why I literally hear Mike Slovis's voice ringing in my ears. Like, what's driving the story? Like, do you really need a shot, two sizes on somebody that, potentially could be kind of a passive character in a scene or whatever like that? So yes, that's a question we're always asking ourselves. Is it driving the story?
And how do you answer that question? You know what I mean? It's like, there's one thing to not get coverage. Well, I guess there's one thing to not have coverage after you edit it and making the decision, okay, we're just going to stick with the shot. But it's another thing to not even capture the coverage. I mean, then you're pretty much committed. Like, you're not getting a close-up if you don't shoot a close-up. So at some point, the decision needs to be made. I'd love to know kind of how you come to that decision. Is this something that you kind of approach each scene with the same kind of thought process?
Yeah, absolutely. And, what's happening in the scene, and, how important is it to get in and see somebody's emotion? Because, we don't do a lot of close-ups, and one thing that we have a real rule about is that we don't do push-ins on people. We do them maybe, 4 or 5 times a season. And so that when we use them, they really count. You know what I mean? But actually, ultimately, it's up to the director. When the buck stops at the after the show has been cut and they do their cut, and then Peter potentially comes in and tweaks a little bit. Has that person captured the essence of the scene? And so ultimately they have to make that decision, and we're there to serve the directors. Ultimately, so really their say goes for pretty much everything.
Tell me more about why you've made the rule to not have those push-ins.
That was actually more, I think, more Peter and Vince, just saving, because it's such an overused move. It really is. And if you save it, it really means something. Like, I remember in season 3, was it? Yes, season 3. Chuck's hearing, we did like a couple of push-ins on him, and I think those were the only ones that we did the whole season when he was in that witness box. And man, they were powerful, just because it's not a language that you see on the show.
I know exactly the shot you're talking about. It's crazy, but that shot has stuck in my mind, and I didn't really know why until right now. Like that move, I must have just subconsciously realized that doesn't happen. And when it did, it was for an important reason. It really stuck out. But yeah, I seeing it in my mind as you're talking about it.
Yeah. No, it comes back. I mean, I've done how many episodes? 30 episodes since then, I think, or 20, 25, 26. And it does to me too. I can literally picture the entire shot in my head. But those are the great ones that kind of stick with you too. It was such a pivotal moment, for all the characters.
So you're the only director of photography, but there are multiple directors coming in throughout a season, and certainly throughout the series. Have you ever been in a situation where a director is wanting to do something that just doesn't match what Better Call Saul is all about? Like, does that ever happen?
It does. Absolutely. And Paul and I will, kind of, and Matt too, I feel like the gatekeepers in a lot of ways, but ultimately, it's their decision. We're there. It's their vision that we're trying to help bring out. And they're the people that, have been hired to bring their vision forward, even, no matter how different it is. So to a certain extent, it's not up to us to decide that. But if something just doesn't make sense, we will oftentimes try to talk them into either getting another piece that might fit the show better or changing it up. But it's only happened a few times. As a matter of fact, it's interesting that you say that, because I did that same episode that we were talking about with Chuck, was directed by Dan Sackheim, was the first one that he did on the show. And he and I did together, and I really loved working with him. But there was a scene in that episode that he wanted to shoot a specific way, and I told him I tried like heck to talk him out of it, and he finally went for it. And it turned into one of the coolest oneers it's one of the coolest shots in the show, where they bring the projector out and we swing around and we go back up. And anyway, and so in an interview, he actually talked about the fact that I talked him out of it, and it turned into something great. So I think he was trying to relay the story that, kind of keep an open mind, no matter how much you're trying to put your vision together, sometimes keep an open mind for guys that are doing this exactly that.
And I think too, there must be and correct me if I'm wrong, but there must be, being the gatekeeper of a show like this, you must like really welcome things that kind of keep it fresh for you, because you're working on the same show day in, day out, day in, day out. It's just human nature to possibly disconnect a little bit, or one day you're more tired, or you're getting bored with something, or whatever. When you're on the same show for this many episodes, you must really want the fresh blood of a new director to kind of light a spark again.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you can really, really feel it when people that, come in really, really get the show and get the language and bring something completely new and fresh to the language, and to the show. Michael Morris is one of those guys. He did actually two episodes in season 5. We usually have a new director every episode, pretty much. So that would be, literally a total of 10. I think
Jeez, wow.
Tom Schnauz did 2 in season 3. I think we had 10 different directors in season 4, and I think Michael did 2 in season 5. But other than that, yeah, they're all different.
Vince must direct at least one each season, right? Or does he not do it anymore?
Oh no, he's there. He's definitely there. We did what is probably the biggest episode of television I have ever participated in this season with Vince.
Oh wow! Can you tell us about it?
It was. I can't tell you much. We had a lot of extra time to shoot it, and it'll all reveal itself when the show airs, which unfortunately is still quite a ways off. But I literally can't say anything else.
Well, which episode is it? Do you know the number?
I do, but I don't. I'm not sure I'm even allowed to say that.
Oh, okay. Wow. All right. Well, this is what happens when we get this exclusive conversation with the DPs. Sometimes you got to hold stuff back. We're on the cutting edge here.
Yeah. And if for some reason, you guys, after it's all over, you want to revisit it briefly, we can definitely do that.
Oh, that's one hell of a tease. That's one hell of a tease. I'd love to hear from your perspective as a cinematographer and director of photography. What are the qualities for you that makes a great director?
Oh boy, it's interesting. That's a tough one because it varies. It seems like, and oftentimes people that are great on some shows aren't necessarily great for other ones. But for me, a director that has done his homework knows kind of what the language of the show is, to reuse a kind of a silly term, and has a definite idea of what it is that they want to bring, and the show and the scenes and shots that are special to them, and what we're doing for them. So comes prepared and really has an idea visually. And we're lucky on Saul that that all of our directors are very visual. But sometimes you work with directors that are more about performance. They're more performance based and less interested in the visuals. So it can that can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes it allows you to kind of have a little bit more freedom to present something to them that you like, and you have a little bit more freedom with kind of shooting the show the way that you would want to shoot it potentially. But I miss that partnership when I don't have it. I enjoy the director's inputs, and like you said, the freshness that it brings really adds a lot to what you're doing.
Let's talk a little bit about camera, lighting, the packages that you're using on season 5. First off, what are you shooting on for season 5?
So we shot the Red. I kind of inherited the Red was shooting. They shot the first 2 seasons on the Red, and so we continued on basically in season 3 with the Red Dragon. But I introduced the Varicam, the Panasonic Varicam, for all of the real low light stuff, which we did all the way through season 3, and then again through season. We actually carried both cameras during season 4. We did El Camino in between, which we shot on the Alexa 65, and everybody absolutely fell in love with that camera, including myself. And so because the LF had become available and they were a size and a K quality that was acceptable for both Netflix and AMC, it became a viable possibility. So we ended up using the LF for all of season 5.
The mini LF?
No, the mini LF it wasn't even announced until we were about 2 weeks in, unfortunately. I'm actually shooting with it now on a series that I'm on, but yeah, it's very similar. I mean, the cameras are identical except for basically the number of, the speed that the LF can do versus the LF mini. I love this mini though. It's great. I mean, it's such a small package. It's fantastic.
It's going to be such a huge success for them. It already is. But it's like, I think the Alexa Mini is their most sold camera. I mean, it's just huge for them. I mean, people clearly want the mini package. They just want it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to fit all of that into that little tiny package is just phenomenal. And, being able to shoot the large format lenses, we're shooting Panavision PV70s on the show I'm on right now. And that's actually what we shot on Saul too. So, 70 millimeter lenses for the LF coverage, which are just beautiful lenses.
Now, what else does the LF, provide to you? for people that may not really even understand what that means, how does it compare to just the traditional Alexa Mini that people may know and love, or maybe even have?
Yeah, right. So the Mini, I think, shoots 3.2K open gate. So the biggest frame I think you can have in 16:9 is 2.8, which is not full 4K UHD, which most people are requesting for post from here on out.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. Although we did carry a Mini on Saul for special occasions that they up-resed and did PhotoChem did a phenomenal job. But so the large format, the LF stands for large format, which is quite it's almost 50% bigger than the original, than the Super 35 format that we've all been using forever and know and love. And so that allows you to have a lot more control over the depth of field, which is something that we use as an important tool on Saul quite a bit. So we're increasing the depth of field by upping the light levels, decreasing the depth of field by dropping the light levels or putting NDs in, so that we can have real control over the focus, and it just allows more of that, and also the lenses, because what's happening is you end up shooting like a wide shot. A super wide shot will be on a 24 millimeter or 21 millimeter lens. You get the characteristics of that lens. So say a 24, which is is a very straight, really nice lens, is like an equivalent of a 16 millimeter in Super 35, but it has no warp. You know what I mean? You get the 24 depth of field, you get the 24 lens characteristics, but you get the width of a much wider lens. So that's part of the attraction too.
Yeah, and that sort of wider, bigger look is just so popular. I mean, I'm going to see. I'm only anticipating more and more LF usage. I mean, a lot of people don't even really remember, but I mean, the rise of Red really. I mean, Red really got its foothold in filmmaking when Netflix and streaming services says you absolutely have to shoot 4K. Like that was kind of the option at the time, aside from being a great camera, obviously. But a lot of people went toward Red because they couldn't use their Alexas. They weren't able to get that 4K acquisition.
Yeah, no, absolutely. At the beginning of Saul, Arthur and Vincent Peters shot a bunch of tests because all of Breaking Bad had been on 35, but they knew that they wouldn't be able to do that for Saul.
Yeah,
they shot a lot of tests including 35, so they could use that as a kind of a baseline, and looked at all the different cameras, and they were amazed at how many of them they had to reject because of that. So the Red, like you said, especially when the show started, it was one of the few options that was really viable at the time.
Talk to me about your lighting philosophy for season 5 and possibly even the entire series, because I'm sure there's some similarities.
Yeah, I mean, I have really gotten away from a lot of the lighting that I did early in my career, especially as a gaffer is kind of what I did for a long time before I moved up as a cinematographer. So lighting kind of is my background, but I've really gravitated towards much more kind of natural looking stuff, things that feel like they're driven by practicals in a kind of much more naturalistic way. And so a lot of the night exteriors, are driven by sodium vapors. We put work lights up. We put our own kind of security lights up all the time, street lights up all the time, because we're kind of trying to drive that rather than put up like a big condor with a backlight on it that so a thing that we all used to do for big night exteriors. So that's mostly it. I'm really driven towards trying to use much more natural looking light, and I find that has driven me towards using the faster side of the cameras. I'm up at 2500 ISO on that on the LF for night exteriors all the time.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I try to give the guys a little bit of a break on the lenses too. So that includes being able to get down to like a 2.8, 2.5 sometimes. So so that the depth of field isn't so shallow for them and so shallow for us unless we want that. But yeah, no, and it's I'm amazed at how well that camera holds up. We used to put a little bit of noise suppression on the Panasonic Baricam, which is 5,000 ISO. It has the two dual ISOs, the 800 and the 5,000.
Yeah.
And then The Alexa, none at all.
Wow.
And it just holds up. It's an amazing camera. Love that camera.
So more natural lighting with practicals. Anything else from a lighting standpoint that you can talk to us about? Maybe is there like a particular light manufacturer you're into right now? Are you predominantly LEDs? Where are you at?
Yeah, we've all kind of changed over to using a lot more LEDs. They're obviously power friendly. They're heat friendly. And for us in Albuquerque, especially in the summertime, that's kind of a nice thing.
Oh yeah.
So I've absolutely embraced them as much as any particular show that I happen to be on and could afford them, at the time. And I will say that something that I use a lot of, and I think people may notice this maybe, you'll see in Saul and also was in El Camino, I use eye lights. I use this because I feel like you can get away with a lot less light on somebody's face if you have a little twinkle in their eye. And so it's kind of Peter gives me crap about it because it's like, oh, there it is. There's the Adams twinkle. And even he'll even go so far as like when he's directing, and can you add a little more highlight here and there? So there's a very fine line between being able to put a twinkle in somebody's eyes and adding more light to their face. And so the thing that I found that I really use and absolutely could not live without now is a 1x panel. With a 30-degree grid, a hard grid on the front of it. The guys put what's called a donut in it, so it's not a square reflection; it's a round reflection. So it basically makes the square light into a circle in the middle.
Yeah,
and we dial it just so that it's just giving them a ping in the eye without adding in any extra light. And it's my go-to move on a lot of these guys, on a lot of the shots. You'll see. I mean, now that you said that, and you watch the show, and it'll drive you crazy.
I'm actually surprised it's a 1x. I would think that's kind of a big source. I was thinking you were going to say like a little, just like maybe even one of those small, what are they, like 2-foot LED tubes? Those, what are they called? Like an Astera tube, but like a teeny one.
Yeah. No, I think it needs to be a bit, what I've discovered is it feels like it needs to be a bit more specular than that. We put a teeny bit of diffusion on it. But the other thing I noticed is that the grids allow for a little bit broader coverage. So the actor can move around a little bit. It doesn't have to be quite so focused, which I tried to do with some of the smaller units. And it's very fast and it's very easy and quick to put up. So, it comes in on a little preemie stand and it's up and going in 10 seconds. So it's oftentimes about efficiency too.
And that grid that you're putting on it, is that helping you to avoid, spraying all across the person's face and just kind of narrowing on the eyes?
Absolutely. And the great things about those grids is that as you move through them, you can actually use different parts of the grid. So in other words, if you're looking at the light, you can, give you a foot or two either direction that fades one way or the other a little bit, so you can get a little bit more of a general coverage. I'm saying a couple of feet maybe from a 5-foot throw or 4-foot throw or something. But they have just enough focus for me that they contain it and don't hose it all over the place, because I hate that. And yet they really contain the light and focus it up and make it nice and sharp. So it's the thing I found that works the most. It works the best for me. Other people may have other things that work for them, but that's the one thing. That's my go-to move.
Do you know the manufacturer? Are you using light panels or Aladdin, or do you know? I'd love to put a link to it in the show notes for people that want to, because that's a very acquirable light. We're not talking about like a $30,000 light. We're talking about something pretty simple they could throw into their workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. And the grid I think is $100 or something. That from B&H. I think I used to use 1x light panels.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And lately, I think just because they seem to be more readily available, I think I've been using the Astras, which may even still be made by. It's a light panel model. The Astras are, which is slightly.
Yeah, Light Panels is the company. Astra's the. I guess
the model.
The model, yeah. So I'm looking at that right now. The Astra 1x1. The light panels are oh God, what are they called? Because I used to have light panels and I transitioned to the super flat like ones that can move, the flexible ones. I can't think of the name of it though. It's driving me crazy. But the Astras were great. I mean, I would still use them. I just happened to sell them and move on to the super, super light ones. But yeah, I'm going to put a link to these in the show notes, and they hold grids really well too. So yes, you're making
and that's something we leave that thing built all the time, and so it's just ready to run.
Flex lights. That's what I have. Flex light. That's the one that I have, and I love them. They're great, but they have like a million different components to it because they're made specifically to be able to break down. So there's like a million cables. There's a whole, like the dimmer unit is separate. When you have the Astra 1x1, it's really nice because it's all kind of one contained light. So there's a big benefit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. That it's usually already ready to go with a battery on it, and it'll last pretty much an entire day, like with one battery. So you don't have to worry about running power to it. It's all self-contained, and you can dial it right in, and it's bicolor, so you can pick whatever color temperature you want.
Can you talk to us a little bit about maybe some other go-to gear that you always like to have with you? Is there like something that's always traveling with you on every shoot?
Yeah, I mean, we use a lot of big guns. It just depends on the situation. I would say that the sky panels have really become a go-to light. The Arri sky panels.
I love those.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the other thing that about being high ISO is you can use those guys instead of say a big tungsten light. In a condor or a scissor lift as an edge or a side light or something like that, and have complete control of the color. You can just dial it right in. So I love them. They're great.
Do you ever use LED Fresnels? Or
I haven't yet. I have
no experience with them, but it's weird because it's like, I think that everybody kind of, it wasn't that long ago where people were like, well, LEDs are really going to become the standard once they have a really strong, great Fresnel. But it kind of seems like people are just transitioning to these sky panels, even though they're soft. They're still just being used as big, giant sources. I mean, you can't focus them the way you can, like a Fresnel. And I know there are HMIs, LED HMIs, but they're super expensive. And it's weird. I kind of feel like the industry almost accommodated for the lack of Fresnels by transitioning more into these sky panels in a way, even though they're not comparable. But there's something about it's not like a perfect replacement. But I'm seeing a lot of that more and more on sets.
Well, I think it's a much more viable. I mean, you get so much punch out of it, and you get all of the color range, and it takes, one Edison plug, so it's working on 15 amps or something like that, 10 amps. So you get an enormous bang for your buck for what it is versus say like a 5K or a 10K or something like. I mean, oftentimes I miss some of the hard lights because I love hard light in some situations. I always come back to the Xenons, even, on El Camino when he's down in the pit. It's funny, we shot all that stuff on stage in the pit, which is all hot sunlight. And then, when she jumped out, she shot the real location and matched the two together. That was, it was a foggy day, of course, and had no hard sunlight, of course. But I love, nothing sells daylight for me like a Xenon does.
Yeah.
There's something really special about them. But yeah, I think you just, it's all about what works for you, and you got to make a commitment, early on as to what you're going to do. Right. And so, to have a tool that has that much to offer, I think is a great thing.
How important do you think it is for directors of photography and cinematographers to have a background as a gaffer?
It's an interesting argument because you can work both sides. I mean, the operators have a composition background. They have a background working with the directors. So there's a great argument for that. But nothing beats, as far as I'm concerned, a DP that can really light. And I think that's very hard for some of the guys that move up that were operators because they just didn't have a lot of experience, in doing it. You can watch and learn from what you see, the people that you're working with, which we all do, obviously. But there's nothing like doing it to really learn how it works, So I think it's very important. But then again, I have an investment in it. But I think it's great for me.
Isn't there an expectation though that as director of photography you are directing the lighting, really. I mean, is that kind of what is you're expected to do and be responsible for?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, it doesn't mean that, you can't rely on your gaffer, which, I had a lot of cinematographers that relied on me as a gaffer to be able to bring that sometimes when that wasn't necessarily their best suit. So, it depends on the team, I suppose. But I sure love having that background. There's no other department that I can talk to and that I know, like I know the electric department. And I know everything that they do. And so that often makes a difference for me in being able to make a small tweak or come in and see something that I can fix or change or do slightly differently that I think would really make me happy for, what we're doing with a particular scene.
David Diaz on Facebook is asking, he's saying that one thing I love about the series is the color of each character. The color of the clothes represents very much their mood or very strong feelings in their life. I find it a really interesting topic to discuss, and one that many don't see until they carefully analyze the content afterwards. So this may be more of a production designer / costume designer question, but I'm kind of curious too. Are you feeling like you're adjusting colors to represent characters and sort of where they are in their storyline?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually really only Saul. I will take David's note and take it one step further, and you will notice if you really look that good people with bad intentions and people with good intentions wear different colors, and they have very specific colors. Kim almost always wears blue, and if you notice, the bad guys will almost always have some sort of red on them. And this is something that, you talk about Pinkman and Walter White. I mean, Vince has been invested in the colors and what they say about people from a very, very, from the beginning, from the inception of Breaking Bad. So that's all, honestly, Vince and Peter. That's very carefully designed and constructed. It's obviously something I need to keep in mind when I'm, lighting the characters or whatever, what it is that they're wearing and how to bring those colors out, or not, clash with them. But it's very, very well thought out and very carefully constructed. And he's absolutely right. It's very deliberate.
Is there anything that you do from a cinematography standpoint that represents a good character versus, a bad character or bad intentions?
We've never carried it that far. Vince and Peter have always been very supportive of me to kind of do what, lighting wise, for the most part, to do kind of whatever I wanted to do and whatever I wanted to bring. I think that they feel, to a certain extent, obviously the darkness and the light, and as we progress, the show is definitely getting darker.
Oh yeah.
But
now you've got that LF. You can really get down there.
Crank it up.
Exactly.
But it's not. We've never actually gone there with a deliberate color for a particular character. That's something that is so well constructed in, say, the props, in the cars, in the wardrobe, that it may. I think they may feel, and I probably would agree with them, that it would be a little over the top.
Yeah, I think you see that. You sometimes see that with contrast a little bit. Not necessarily even light, not necessarily the exposure of something, but you might sidelight an evil character or just give them a little bit more drama in their face. And, it's interesting to think about it from a color perspective. I hadn't noticed that, David. So thanks for your question. I think that was a good one.
Yeah, no, it was a very good one.
And I'm going to mispronounce this and I apologize, but Mohit Subedi, MOHIT SUBEDII on Instagram. So please follow this person, especially since I butchered the name. He wants to know about the Gene scene, this black and white little Gene teaser, the flash forward that was at the beginning of the first episode of season 5. Lots of people excited about what they're seeing here, and lots to talk about it and speculation. So can you speak about it? His specific question was, were the scenes shot black and white, or is that something that happened in post? So definitely answer that. But then I also would like to get your thoughts on this flash forward whole storyline that's getting more and more developed.
Yeah, I mean, the gene thing has been something they've done from the very beginning. It's always the first episode of the season, and you get a brief glimpse into where Gene's life kind of is at this point. So Bob Odenkirk is playing the three characters, both Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman and Gene Takovic. And they all have different facial expressions. And it wasn't actually till one of the guys actually put the three faces on a T-shirt that I realized how different they really all look.
Really?
But yeah. But no. So we don't change anything about the camera. We definitely put a black and white LUT on. We all monitor in black and white. We'll actually even go out and shoot stills and things of the locations with the same LUT so that we know where colors are going to go. I don't know if you guys remember in season 4, when Gene was in the hospital, we had to make sure that all of the paints in the hospital were bringing out the right contrast, because that's a real thing in black and white if you actually saw it in person, it was like this bizarre orange and blue and green. It was the most gaudy thing you've ever seen, but it photographed beautifully in black and white. So they're very committed to the black and white. Everybody knows that's kind of, what's happening. And, with all the Gene scenes, and because they also take place in Omaha, which, is different too, because we deal with the snow at the moment now. But so the teaser in season 5 was a much longer dose of Gene than I think people are used to getting.
It was the longest for sure, right? It had to have been. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's still the teaser, but they have a tendency to kind of expand and contract the teaser depending on what and also I think every episode in season 5 is over 50 minutes long, if I'm not mistaken. I may be misquoting Peter there, but I think they may even be like 55. And I think the last 3 are like 59 minutes, all 3 of them.
Wow. I'm so excited for the remainder of this season. It's driving me crazy. I need to get caught up. I really need to get caught up. So you're not shooting in black and white, but you're putting a black and white LUT on it. So that's how you're monitoring it. And you're making accommodations to the lighting and wardrobe and color palette in order to best suit black and white.
Absolutely. And it's unless you shoot film, it's impossible to really shoot black and white. I mean, you're typically using a digital camera, a digital color camera.
Yeah.
And I think that if you look around, you'll discover that most of the stuff that's being shot in black and white these days, I think is actually using the Alexa LF or the 65 and just taking the color out of it. The Bob Forrester scene, the vacuum cleaner man in episode 1 was actually shot concurrently with El Camino. So we shot it when he was there, when we were there on El Camino, luckily. I think, Bob made it through, but I don't know how ill he was, so I'm not sure he would have been able to come back out. But it was we just happened to be working with him, and they said, hey, we've got this one scene. Can we bang off his side of it? And so we did. Vince actually directed that first scene, his side of it. While Bob was there, and it just worked out perfectly.
And our last question from our audience is Chris Antonio on Instagram is asking, how much do you alter the color in post compared to what you shoot on the day? Talk to us about your color workflow. How involved are you in it?
Oh, I'm very involved. Very, very involved. I missed a couple. I mean, I'm always screening the episodes. They send them to me with the dailies color on them, and I make tons and tons and tons of notes for the final colorist for anyone that I might miss, because I happen to be actually up in Canada shooting another film for the first. I missed the first couple episodes, but I absolutely did the last 6 I was there for. With the colorist, and we don't change it much. We have a general LUT that we use for contrast and color for essentially all of everything but Mexico. We have a New Mexico LUT, or we have a Mexico LUT, which you'll see. Mexico always has a kind of that. Actually, it started out with Michael Slovis and his tobacco filters that he was. People actually make fun of it on the internet, even that. There's a great shot I've seen. It's a meme, and that over the border wall, and on one side it's white, and the other side it's tobacco, right down the border. But It's a color that, we've toned it back a little bit for Saul, but it's a color palette that we've embraced, and it absolutely is Michael Slovis's gift to the show. So other than those two LUTs, that's pretty much it. And those are the colors that the dailies guys put on. I mean, they tweak and play with it a little bit because they know kind of my style. And then we get into final color. We use some windows occasionally, but as far as big changes, none at all.
Well, the show looks great. Season 5, we're 2 episodes in and so excited for where this season is going to go. And I can't thank you enough for coming back on the show, Marshall, to talk about it. So thank you. My
pleasure, Ben. It was great to talk to you again. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me. And people tune in because you're in store for a heck of a ride. This season is a heck of a ride.
All right, I want to thank Marshall Adams for coming back on the show to talk about Better Call Saul Season 5. And of course, his experience on the show and the way that the show has changed over the years. It's so interesting to see a show like this kind of evolve. It's beloved, and, for good reason. I know I certainly love it. You know what else I love? Matt Russell. That's right. He mixes and masters and makes the show sound so delicious. You can find him at gainstructure.com and on Twitter at gainstructure. Of course, our producer, Connor Crosby, puts it all together behind the scenes. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com. And you can follow me at Ben Consoli on Instagram and Twitter. Now, I've been putting a lot of effort into my Instagram. So if you guys love behind the scenes and you want to know what I'm working on, that is the place to go. In fact, I have a shoot coming up in 2 days, and I'm going to be posting the whole day. So if you guys follow me on my Instagram stories when I have shoots, we are constantly posting. So it's a good way to see what we're working on. We also have a brand new website for my company, BC Media Productions, bcmediaproductions.com. Check it out for yourself. All of our new projects are up there and some behind the scenes. And we know you love that stuff. So it's all there at bcmediaproductions.com. And while you're surfing the World Wide Web, go to gocreativeshow.com. That's the place to go for everything. You could subscribe to our show there, get to our YouTube page, find us on social media. Everything you need is right there. I want to thank our sponsors, Host Lab, stress-free collaboration for Final Cut Pro, and Rule Boston Camera, buy, rent, create at rule.com. Without these people, the show wouldn't exist, so please support those that support us. And we will see you next time on another episode of Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.